Hey guys, welcome to another episode of NetSec Now. Today we're going to talk more about web app pen testing. And if you remember in our last video, which you should go back and check it out if you haven't already, we went ahead and set up DVWA, or otherwise known as Damn Vulnerable Web App. And that is to give us a private environment to, learn more about, certain types of attacks, and injections and all sorts of good stuff. So starting off in sequence, the very first thing that we're going to check out is the brute forcing option. Now, brute forcing is usually something that's very noisy. We don't necessarily always recommend it, but in a pen test, if you're doing like a password audit or something to that nature, or even some sort of security audit, PCI, DSS compliancy, whatever, they have web apps with logins. That's something that you may want to explore. So that being said, let's go ahead and go forward here in the slides. So our lesson plan on brute forcing. Basically what we're going to do is set up Burp Suite as a web proxy. We're going to be using Hydra to crack usernames and passwords. We're going to be talking a little bit about HTTP methods, specifically GET and POST, and we're going to get into how that all works. And then also we're going to talk a little bit about form data and parsing needed information from the data. So brute forcing form logins, things you're going to need is DVWA, of course. Like I said, there's a link right here to the video that we set it up and showed you how to configure it. Kali Linux 2.0, hopefully you're on that now, and that's why you're watching some of these videos. If not, go ahead and get that. But realistically, any Linux, Unix operating system will do. Hydra command line version comes installed, pre-installed in Kali Linux 2.0, as well as Hydra GTK, which is cool. That's the web UI, or not the web UI, but the GUI front end of Hydra. Burp Suite, the free edition is pre-installed into Kali Linux. You may run across something where you need to set it up while you're starting it for the first time, but it's usually just yes or no answers. Use your own discretion there. Web browser, of course. I use Iceweasel as a default in Kali Linux. Feel free to use whatever you want, but Iceweasel is what I'm going to be using here. And then, of course, the username and password lists, and Kali Linux has an abundance of them in various directories in the pen test stuff. So check those out. You could also find some online. And on our website today, I actually posted the top 30 passwords that were cracked from the whole Ashley Madison hack. And quite honestly, both parties, Ashley Madison and the users, should be ashamed. The users for creating such crappy passwords, and then of course Ashley Madison for not having a good password policy, seeing how their business was what it was. Okay, so moving forward, guys, let's just briefly talk about HTTP methods, because we're going to be kind of using those buzzwords here and there as we're going through. So the GET method, and of course it's part of the HTTP protocol, and it all happens behind the scenes, but we're going to be taking a look at behind the scenes here and seeing how they actually do work. Whenever you visit a web page, you're using usually a GET command to get the files or get the web page information, data, so on and so forth, and you're basically making a request to get that stuff. POST method is actually used to post data to something, usually a form of some sort or some sort of input. It's basically you're inputting something to somewhere. So that being said, let's go ahead and get out of the presentation here and get on over to starting our setup. Now, I went ahead and created myself a cracking directory here in my home folder on Kali Linux, being a regular user with sudo or privileges. What I want to do here is you can obviously download or use whatever password list and username lists that are included in Kali Linux, or download them from wherever. However, I'm just going to create two quick files here, just a usernames and a passwords list, and just throw a couple of usernames and passwords in these files for time's sake here. So I'll go ahead and use VI. You can use whatever you want, or like I said, you can get them from anywhere. Usernames.txt, and I'm just going to go ahead and insert some random usernames here. Okay. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing for a passwords list. some of these passwords, surprisingly enough, were used by Ashley Madison. So go out and check out our website, learnnetsec.blogspot.com, and check out the latest posting, and you'll see it. Let's see. Okay, that should be enough. Just give us a couple here for speed purposes or for time for the video. Now you can see I have both of my files there. Let me just go ahead and clear out the screen. Okay, so the very first thing I guess I'm going to go ahead and show you guys is how to do a little bit of information gathering here while we're working on our project. So let's just open up our, and remember of course just to visit the video there about configuring and setting up, starting up DVWA, but let's just go ahead and open up our DVWA main login page here. Of course the username is admin, password is password for the default. And let me go ahead and scroll down here, make sure security level is low. If it's not, go ahead and change it, guys. We went through that in the last video as well. Let's go over to our brute force section here. This is where we're starting off. And brute forcing, basically, like I said, is just to guess usernames and passwords of some sort of secure area. It could be an application, it could be a web application, it could be a portal, it could be all types of different things. It could be mail servers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And we did some brute forcing videos with Hydra GTK previously about cracking mail server passwords. I believe it was in our low-level, low-tech, hacking, website defacing video that we made. That being said, the very next step here is the very first thing you want to do is check out the source code of the page. So just right click anywhere in there, go to view page source. Now let's go ahead and expand this up. Now just to quickly find the data, I use Control F for find or the search. I just type in form because that's all I'm interested in is the form data. Well, you can see here form action is a £, and method is get. So it looks like it's using some sort of form in of itself. It's probably getting some parameters, and I guess using PHP programming you can actually use a get request to get parameters and match them up for what's expected. You can see the username field input type is text, and the name is username. Now that's the actual name that's submitted to the PHP document that it's actually getting. Usually forms post data, right? And usually get is to request something to be pulled down to view it. But in this case, they're being a little tricky here, and they're using some get data to send the data over and match it up. I'm not going to get into too much of PHP programming here. That's not the scope of this video. So the next input type is password, and the type being password is actually it's changing your password, what you type in. Instead of being clear text, it's changing into decimals, dots, asterisks, whatever, so nobody can shoulder surf you and try to look at your password of what you're typing. Autocomplete is off, and the name is password. Now another important field that should be here, if a programmer was actually thinking, would be a maximum password length, or a maximum length for that input box. So you can only type, say, 20 characters total. So sometimes there's min, max. I mean, it really depends on the programmer. And then of course it's submitting the value login and the name login, so that's some sort of parameter into the script that's posting this, or actually sending this over to. So that being said, let's just go ahead and get out of this. Let's just try any random username here and password. Just put wrong user and then wrong pass and see what happens. Okay, so obviously it didn't let us in. A couple interesting tidbits of information here is the error message that it outputs on the bottom of our screen here. That's pretty important. We're going to want to use that actually. And then to look at the actual URL up here to get yourself an idea of what's actually taking place here. So of course it's sending over the username equals wrong user and password equals wrong pass, which is what we just typed in, and it's saying login equals login, so do the login is basically the what's happening here. So let's not go ahead and worry about this URL right now. What I would love to do here is worry about this this error message. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this here. I'll open up a LeafPad document just to start keeping notes. Always a good idea, guys. If you watch some of our other videos, I'm all about keeping notes, accurate notes as you're going through your pen test. It may or may not help you for your final report, but it just helps you to keep your mind moving forward and lessen the amount of stuff you have to remember on the fly. So I just want to go ahead and type in error message here. Okay, that's our error message. And then go down a couple of lines here, go back up to our website. Now is where I'll copy the actual link, and I'll just put URL. Alright, so now we got some little bit of information here, and let's go ahead and go forward with actually creating the setup. Now, what Burp Suite is, among many other things, is a web proxy or a proxy for us. Now, when you think about a web proxy, think about a man-in-the-middle attack. And for those of you that may or may not be familiar with what a man-in-the-middle attack is, let me give you a quick refresher. A man-in-the-middle attack is basically you as the attacker sitting in between two people communicating. Let's say user A is trying to send a message over to user B to say, hey, how's your day going? User A sends it out thinking he's sending it to user B in the packet, the headers, and all that stuff, which we'll get to in some advanced videos. But user A is sending that message intended for user B to user B. You're sitting in the middle. It now comes to you first. You look at it, take a copy of it, what have you, and forward it on over to user B. User B sees user A's message and responds back with, hey, my day's great, how's yours, or whatever, and goes and sends it back to user A. But instead, it now comes back to me first. I look at it, take a copy of it, what have you, and I forward it on over to user A. User A and user B never know that I'm there. So it's basically eavesdropping. That being said, that's how we're going to use Burp Suite today. Let me just go back and get ourselves set up here to the main site. Now I want to go ahead and go into our menu, applications menu, and web application analysis and Burp Suite. Now, again, like I said in the beginning of the video, I don't remember, but I think when you fire this up for the first time, it may ask if you want to submit data or something. And like I said, guys, just use your best discretion, of course. But this is the free edition. They do have a professional edition, which does cost, I think it's like $299 for the year. But it does give you some added functionality. It gives you some vulnerability analysis and things like that. You might get this error message here for new versions available. I'm not worried about it. I'll wait for it to come out in the repos, but you certainly could go to their website and pull down the latest version. So that being said, what we want to do here is go up to the proxy tab here on the very top. You notice that intercept is already set to on, which is good. Then we're going to go over to options, and this usually should be filled out for you. If not, you can always add or edit it. Just go ahead and click it, click edit, and you can change the binding port here to whatever you want, 9999, 1234, whatever you want, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it to 8080, and I'm going to bind to the address loopback only, and I'm just going to go ahead and cancel out of this. And of course, all the other options that are down here, you certainly feel free to scroll down and check some of them out. Intercept client requests, I just go ahead and leave that the way it is. Most of the defaults are pretty good for what we're going to be doing here in this demo. So now I go back to our intercept tab. Intercept is on. But now you're saying to yourself, well, how are we going to intercept the data? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Well, here's the key. So you have to go into your browser. Again, I'm using the latest and greatest of Iceweasel here. Go to File, Edit and Preferences. And you can see it opens up another tab here. You want to go under your Advanced on your menu option here on the left and go to the Network tab and then Connection here and go ahead and click on Settings. You're going to want to go ahead down to Manual Proxy Configuration. You can see I've already had mine filled out here, but just type in the address of your local loopback, which is 127.0.0.1, and go ahead and put the port to whatever you set the port to in Burp Suite. So now that that's good, we just click OK, and we can go ahead and close out this tab. So now we really have a man-in-the-middle attack, an eavesdropping attack, i.e. proxy, in between the requests that we send out to the web and what the web actually sends back to us. Now we're in full control of this. We have to choose to either forward it, inspect it, drop it. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do, but let's get set up and get started. So we need some information. I want to look at the post or the GET request, and I want to actually see what's going on in there. So again, what we could try to do here is, now we got Burp Suite going, and we're on the Intercept tab. Intercept is on. There is no raw data in here at all. Let's go ahead and just type in the dummy username and password again. Wrong user, and then wrong pass, and hit login. Now this time you'll see what the actual request looks like. So again, we're using GET. Let me just move this over so it's, there we go. We're using a GET request. Oops, sorry about that. Using a GET request, and we are requesting DVWA vulnerabilities brute, and then username equals wrong user, and password equals wrong pass, and login equals login. Well, that's what we saw in the URL, but sometimes the URL doesn't actually show the parameters, right? Sometimes the programmer had half of a brain and won't disclose those details. So that being said, this is where this comes into play as to being important. There's some critical information in here that we need to go ahead and copy. So the very first thing I would do here is copy the actual request method. So just go copy this, go back into our notepad, and go ahead and post that in there. Go back to Burp Suite. Stepping down, you can see it just is using the protocol version of HTTP. HTTP is version 1.1. That's fine. We don't care about that really at this point. The host is localhost, so we can go ahead and Control C that, and step on down 2 lines, paste that in there. Now again, guys, it's all about building your information here. So user agent, we don't really need that, but that's what it tells the web server what versions of software we're using, Linux, what version of browser we're using, Firefox, Iceweasel, same thing, and it's Mozilla 5.0. Except text HTML applications, that's all the different file types and encodings it accepts. Language is English. Except encodings or gzip and deflate. The refer is where we came from. Not necessary to copy this at this point, guys, because we pretty much already have all that information up here, and again in our host that we copied. So here's where it gets intense too. You have to have this information, and it's weird, and I'll explain it to you as we get to that point. But realistically, the reason why you got to have this right here, your cookie information, is because of the way DVWA is set up. Now, I guess in part, it's actually a good idea to go through this now, so when you come across this later in your pen testing career, you'll know why. So the reason behind this is because when you go to your default DVWA installation and you fire it up on the web browser for the first time, you're greeted with that first login screen like you saw earlier in the video. Now, that being said, you have to log into there to be able to make any kind of navigation changes on the menu and so on and so forth. So where this would apply is if you're doing a pen test, say for a company, and they have like some sort of shout box or a forum software, and you think, hey, there might be a vulnerability in there. I need to get to an admin page, but you can't just find an admin login. First, they have to log in as a regular user, and this is the way it used to be on PHP bulletin board software, PHP BB. Back in the day. I haven't used it now, so I don't really know for sure. But you had to log in under your regular user account, and then you could click the admin tab once you logged in, and then it would prompt you with an admin login. So if you wanted to try to brute force that admin login, there was no other way to get there besides being pre-authenticated with a regular user account, like I said. So what I did is I would log in create a regular user account. I'd log in, grab that PHP session ID, the cookie, and then I'd use that in my data, and I'd send it out to authenticate and then try to crack the admin login. And that's what we're going to try to do here. Hopefully that makes sense, because sometimes things buzz around in my head and maybe they don't really make sense to anybody else, but I think it's pretty clear and easy to understand. So let's go ahead and copy this and just go ahead and paste it in there. Okay, so we have really all of our necessary details here, and in Burp Suite, of course, you can see that nothing has changed yet, and it's still thinking up here, still loading, because we didn't hit forward. All right, we just held that request hostage, if you will. But now that we hit forward, you can see that now it went ahead and it posted our error message, which we already checked out before because we were just doing some basic checks before we tried to fire up any tools on it. And you can see that we had that error message up here. That's going to be important for in just a few minutes here when we start to use Hydra to crack the username and password. Okay, so at this point, we're pretty much kind of done with Burp Suite. We can turn Intercept off. We can actually go back to our DVWA, go back to our browser anyway. Just go back into Preferences, Advanced down here, Network, of course, Settings. Let's just go ahead and take our proxy off because we don't really need that anymore at this point. We've got all of our information that we need. Let's close out that tab. Okay, so now is when we get into working with Hydra. And let me just go ahead and make this bigger so we can actually see what we're doing here. Alright, so Hydra is simply issued by the command Hydra, and for the help file it's tac help. And you can see we got a lot of information here. I'm going to forewarn you guys that Hydra is very, very, very sensitive, very, very picky in the way that the syntax is used, capitals and non-capitals, lowercase stuff, the position of your actual commands in series with the rest of the commands. I mean, it's ultra picky. So if you do run into, when you're practicing this on your own, if you do run into where it's giving you error messages or it's taking way too long and you're thinking like, hey, I'm doing a test here on DVWA and I only got 3 usernames and 3 passwords, why is it taking a half an hour? It shouldn't. Check your syntax first and foremost. It took me a good solid hour to try to figure out how to properly line everything up to actually get this to work to show you guys. So that being said, also when I do find that it takes me a while to figure out syntaxes and just the right way to fire something off, whether it be an exploit or commands into a program or something, I actually copy that and put it into a text file with commands, and so I can use it as a reference to go back to that next time if I forget something or get something wrong or just to save time. So I've actually done that here, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But just to go through some of the options here, and I'm not going to go through all of them, guys, because feel free to read this on your own, do a little bit of homework. First and foremost, tac capital R restores a previous aborted crashed session. So if you're in the middle of it and you're like, man, something don't seem right, you can Control C out of it and maybe make some adjustments or whatever, and you can actually just fire up Hydra with tac capital R and it'll restore the previous aborted session. So that being said, the next ones we're really going to follow up on here is these right here, and I will show you why and explain to you why in just a second. So tac lowercase l login. Login here would be the place of your username. So let's just say we're doing a password audit and our client gave us all the usernames, or we somehow did some social engineering or use like recon ng or something to find all of the usernames and enumerated them for that organization, but we're doing a weak password audit. And so we just have a password list with just your very common top 1,000 passwords or something, and then that's part of our audit. That's where this would come in to save some time. Tac lowercase l, and let's say we're after the username Mary. Okay, we would type in tac capital L Mary, and on the same token, if you were after a ton of users, let's say you had to audit the whole entire organization, okay, when there was like 50 users in there or something, and you enumerated all 50 users, you could use a tac capital L followed by the path to your usernames file that you had created. Again, we created a usernames.txt and a passwords.txt in our cracking directory, in our home directory. So that being said, there's a very big difference between tac lowercase l and tac capital L. Now moving on down the list here is tac lowercase p for password. Let's just say you wanted to audit all 50 users and you're only interested in the users that had weak passwords, like password for instance, or QWERTY123 or something. You would type in tac lowercase p and then password or QWERTY or something for one individual password. If you, however, wanted to do another password audit, you would type in tac capital P followed again by the syntax or the location of your password file. So that's two big differences there. That's something that's pretty important, and I'll show you why in just a little while. You can use colon separated files, guys. You could use a list of servers. You know, if you were auditing a company's mail servers, for instance, and they had a bunch of them for, you know, failover or whatever, you could certainly go ahead and do that. You can write the found login passwords to an output file as opposed to the std out, which is live to you on the screen. Going down the list here, there's not really much else in those options that we're concerned with, except for verbose mode. Always, if there's an option for that, I recommend. And this, in this case, is TAC capital V. And then that shows the login password for each attempt. You can just do the lowercase v just for verbose mode. Let's see here. So then the other options that we have here are supported services. Now these are actual individual modules, and I'll show you how to look those up in just a second. So supported services are asterisk, Cisco, Cisco Enable, Firebird, FTP, FTPS, and then where we're concerned is HTTP and HTTPS, the head and get requests, or the HTTP and HTTPS get and post TAC form module, which we're trying to attack a form to log in. So we need to use that. To be able to find out which module has, you know, whatever usage details, there's a separate command here. It's TAC capital U followed by the module name you're looking to use to get information specific to that module. So let's go ahead and just issue that real quick. So it's Hydra, TAC capital U, and then HTTP, TAC get, TAC post, I believe it is, or no, HTTP, TAC get, TAC form, and now it gives you a whole different set of usages for that specific module. Now, the thing is, modules in here are called a specific way. They're called a different way than what you're used to in MSF Console and, you know, Social Engineering Toolkit and Recon NG and all those good tools. And I'll show you that in a little bit as well. So, that being said, you can go ahead and feel free to read through these guys as you're using them. We will show you the syntax of the commands we're going to use in just this demo here. And then I'll go over them in detail. And they of course give you some examples like they did on the other page. And that's pretty cool because at least you have an idea of where to go here. What we might want to check out here is, I believe it's in here. You can enter in your failure messages and or success, and I think that's right up here. Third is the string that it checks for is an invalid login by default. Invalid condition login check can be preceded by F equals, which is a success condition. Successful condition login check must be preceded by the S equals. So we took our failure message, if you remember, from when we logged in with the wrong username and password when we were doing our initial recon on the form itself. Let's go back and I'll show you how that all works. I'm just going to go ahead and clear out the screen here. Now again, guys, like I said, it took me a while to get the syntax exactly perfect since this system is so picky about it. So I copied it and pasted it into my commands file here just to save some time. I'm going to go ahead and paste this. Now I know you guys that have been following me from the beginning, you know that I hate copying, pasting codes and commands and things like that. I like to type everything out manually. It's just me, that's how I am. But in this case, it's going to save a tremendous amount of time besides screwing around with syntaxes and whatnot. So just to go ahead from the very top here, once I get my cursor all the way to the top, we will step through it left to right, and we will explain each and every section. So getting back up here, of course we call it by Hydra, and then we're going to follow it by our host, which if you remember, we went to here, and our host was localhost, but I mean realistically we know that that's 127.0.0.1. I just use the IP address because it's a little bit easier. Followed by TAC capital V, because I want to show all of the failed attempts, make sure I'm not missing anything, and then of course TAC capital L, and then the route or the path to where my usernames file was that we just created in the beginning of the video. then followed by tac capital P, which then shows you the same directory to where the actual passwords file is. And then here comes our module. So like I was saying about MSF console, set the social engineering toolkit, recon ng, and all of the other goodies, that have modules or availability to call in modules and give them syntaxes. This one's different. Instead of like a load module XYZ in, for instance, MSF console, this one here, you just put in the actual module. And like I said, it's very important to have this in a certain way or a certain order so as not to get screwed up. So we're using the HTTP tac get tac form module, which is what we saw in our data from burp suit. Is it's actually using a get request to put the parameters in. And so going back over here, working our way down, now we had to put in the actual path on the website, in this case, to where our form lives. And of course, just going back up to our notepad here, guys, to be a little bit redundant, it came right after the get request, and that's actually where our form lives, is right here in brute. So /dvwa /vulnerabilities /brute. So then going back up there, now here's the weird thing, is every time you want to use a parameter here with a variable, you have to put in a colon. Very super important. So username, as we saw in our request, username equals, and we put wrong user. Going back here, username equals now, and I don't know what you call these symbols, guys. I call them up arrows. I mean, you can call them upticks. I don't really care. But user in all capitals is specifying to say, hey, if we issued the tac capital L command, let's go ahead and use those usernames in this text file, or in the usernames file for this matter, in order top to bottom in sequence. And then stepping forward, our next parameter is obviously the password, as we saw again in here. Our next parameter here is password. That's passed on to the login script. And the same idea here, the uptick arrows, capitals, all capitals, pass, says, hey, if we're using the tac capital P, go ahead and go ahead and use the passwords from top to bottom in here, stored in this directory in the passwords.txt file. Moving on, let me just scroll down a little bit here to get the rest of this stuff into focus. So moving on, and then it says go to end login equals login. So that's what it's telling us, do the login. And then of course, now here's where our error message comes in. Now we need this for error checking, right? Otherwise it would just go into an infinity loop, because we don't know whether or not we got a good login or a bad login. I mean, it's not actually going to tell you like, yeah, okay, server message 200, okay, you're in. So we need to tell them, okay, colon F for the failure message equals, and we saw that in the module help file that we just looked at before, equals incorrect. Now if you remember, our error message was the whole thing was username and or password incorrect with a period. Well, we snipped all that because we just don't feel like writing things out forever. So I just used incorrect because, and in my testing obviously, a successful connection is not going to say incorrect, right? A successful login will say, it won't say the incorrect successful login, so it wouldn't make sense. So that being said, we use the error message because we want to know when it's actually guessing wrong. Now here's where the cookie comes in. So again, another colon, and the cookie with the PHP session ID. Now again, guys, this is very important in this way, because we're using our regular system or a regular account to step up and try to get admin status in this special admin portal or whatever. Okay, so if this was just a web-based form hanging out there that was like admin login.php, of course we wouldn't really need a cookie with the PHP session ID. So now I obviously had this copied and pasted, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase this, just the numbers here. Then I'm going to go into my notes document. I'm going to go ahead and copy just the ID number, and Control C, and then just paste it in here. and then security equals low. Now, for whatever reason, this is why I said it's very, very picky. For whatever reason, I had security equals low before PHP session ID, and it wouldn't work, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I don't seem to understand. I mean, that's what the way it was in the header, and what the hell? So it's very, very picky, guys, and I changed it around, and it seems to work fine. So go figure. I don't know if that's a bug or if it's intentional. I have no idea. It's probably the way that Hydra parses the data to send it over in that module. So that being said, let's go ahead and fire this bad boy off. Go ahead and hit enter, and you can see it scrolls past pretty quick. Of course, obviously we're working local. We didn't do rate limiting or anything else. If you had a password lockout policy, unless you intend to launch a denial of service, a user level denial of service attack to lock out people from their accounts, you might want to mess around with some of the syntaxes of the rate limiting to, how much time in between requests and how many attempts per username and password and so on and so forth. But we're not interested in that at this point. But that will be something in our advanced series that we're going to be doing on our website, not on YouTube. So look forward to that. So anyway, it goes past, and you could say it says, see it says max 16 tasks per one server. Overall 64 tasks, 42 login tries, and so on and so forth. It's attacking the service with the HTTP GET form module on port 80, and it goes to target localhost down here, and it tries to log in Bob with the password username, and then it tries again Bob with the password 123456, and then it tries it all the way down to an empty password, which we know is not it, and then it goes to the next lady or next person in the list, Mary in this case, and Joe, and so on and so forth, going all the way down here until it actually found the login. And again, it found that these people up here were not part of the system anyway, or at least they didn't have the correct combination between a username and a password because of that error message that we put into the module. So once it found that it did not meet an error message, the error message was not displayed, it said, okay, the username's got to be admin and password. So it's a good way of checking things out in terms of being able to get a proper username and password guess. So that being said, we know that our login is now admin and password. If we went back up to DVWA, at this point here, I just want to go ahead and refresh the page. Admin and password. So go ahead and log in, and sure enough, you can see that we logged in, and here would be our success message. But us as pen testers, we're never going to know that success message to send with the module until we actually log in, right? So of course we have to use an error message. Now a lot of times form data doesn't give you an error message. It'll simply just refresh the page, and you're kind of SOL in that regard. So it automatically tries to use, I don't want to say the different codes, but there's certain response codes that it'll use to determine whether or not it's successful or it's failed. So that's in the HTTP headers as well. But again, guys, when we do the advanced series of this, which is actually going to be specifically hosted on our website as classroom training or on-demand training, we'll get into all that good stuff, and we'll get into it in great detail and depth, and there'll be slides available and videos to download and study guides and all sorts of good stuff. So look forward to that. I don't want to go too much further on that because I'm still working on it. So that being said, we logged in here. We successfully set up a man-in-the-middle proxy attack, if you will. We intercepted data being sent to and from the web server. We interpreted this data. We figured out what methods it was using to put the data to the website or get data from the website or from the form into the form. We used that data, and we crafted a very stealthy attack via the Hydra, brute forcing attack. We've created usernames, passwords, files, which obviously you guys can do on your own there. And we successfully broke into a login. Now, again, guys, this wasn't that hard because we kind of know all this stuff already. But it's good to test this in your own environment because, like I said, you can do a user-level denial of service attack on accident if there was a strict password lockout policy, right? So automated controls, it will really screw up, your client. So that's something that has to be in your contract as well. Just know that. So that's pretty much it, guys. It wraps it up for this. In other news, I really do appreciate again all the support, the likes, the subscribes, the shares, the people following me on Twitter. I really, really appreciate that. You guys are doing an awesome job, so if you don't mind, like, subscribe, and share this video here. Check out the description for all the links to certain things, especially our website and the Twitter. I'm not really big on the Google Plus things, guys, so if you got things you want to check me out on, just always default to Twitter or our blog, which is learnnetsec.blogspot.com for the time being. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.